We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
Not only will this tax plan pay for itself, but it will pay down debt.
There are moral and legal obligation questions that I think we'll have to wrestle with as a society.
When we as people go wobbly on the truth, we go wobbly on America.
All you have to do is look at the numbers, look at what we've done.
And this is only the beginning.
You know, Matt, I think we're going to have to get a new introduction because next week from now, new president.
Yeah, new administration. I've been telling you that for a while. Like, nobody knows who Rex Tillerson is anymore.
That's true. We should do one final hoorah where if anyone can name all of the people who say stuff during an introduction, I don't know, we give you a button or something. I don't even know if we're allowed to give out things.
We don't have any money, so.
Right. We're all volunteers here.
Nobody wants to call in, so it's not like we can, like, offer you a chance to call in or something like that. So.
Right. We're also pre-recorded.
Well, yeah. I mean, you didn't have to tell them that, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, if anyone wants to guess who all those folks are in our introduction, what a great way to pass an afternoon, because I certainly don't know what else I do with my life. I basically just give Wegmans $100 every day, because I just...
Rex Tillerson, John Oliver, and Emperor Palpatine. What do I want?
Emperor Palpatine is in there 2 times, actually. So yeah, that's up there. Well, that's our hint to you. Rex Tillerson and Emperor Palpatine's in there. Folks, you're tuned into Evidence of Design. I'm 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. I'm your host, Jason Taylor, joined also by my good friend and co-host, Matt Treadwell.
Yo.
We are pre-recorded today because COVID-19 is still really bad out there. It's actually worse than it's ever been. It's funny saying that after more than a year. Because what do we do on this show? We critique income and wealth inequality because there's too much economic inequality out there. And that economic inequality isn't just morally unfair. It's not like, oh, this person has more money because they're a better person than you. Obviously, that's not a good way to think about a human being or living in the society together, but it also manifests viscerally, grotesquely, and very really for many people, whether it comes to housing or race or gender or putting food on the table or a roof over your head. Economic inequality matters. We think there should be less of it, and we think our governments and we can do things to reduce it. That's what we do here on Evidence of Design. Thanks for joining us. We're looking at an administration that's going out. Trump was impeached for the 2nd time this week, the only president to have the esteemed, historical achievement of being impeached twice.
The only president so far.
Right. I'm fully in support of us trying to get a few more impeachments of Trump in there in the next week. I mean, by the time the show airs, it's recorded on Thursday, January 14th, airing first January 16th. I'm sure we can scrape up a few ideas of how to impeach Trump more often. There was that time that he tried to shut down the government to build a border wall. There was that time he was putting kids in.
That's like the worst he's ever done, in my opinion.
Dude, we covered that for like
besides
4 shows in a row. It was like an entire month of us just like our voices getting sadder and sadder every week. Whereas like this many people aren't getting paid right now, because Trump wants to build a medieval wall. Yeah, maybe that's something that we could look into. Maybe that time he like put kids in cages, that would be all right. Maybe the time that he did he did assassinating Iranian generals. That was interesting. How about the times that he like didn't pay taxes for 20 years? I don't know, man. I'm just having fun with this. But hey, what are we talking about today? 3 different things. 1, we're talking about Trump's social media ban. So following last week's riots at the Capitol and storming of the Capitol by Trump supporters, Twitter and Facebook, among others, made what I thought was quite a surprising decision to remove Trump from their platforms. At Real Donald Trump is no more. Wow, that is the biggest change in my life. No longer can I look up Trump tweets. I don't know why I don't sound happier about that, but Trump's banned from Twitter and Facebook. Big deal. Was that or was that not the right decision? We're going to talk about that. That has profound implications for all of us in the society. The power for big tech, for private corporations to potentially silence people's speech is important. And also the power of big tech and how we use big tech too, you know, how we choose to behave online in our own sort of solitude and safety of our bedrooms or wherever we're posting. That matters. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how President-elect Joe Biden, as of today and the day of recording, released his $1.9 trillion economic stimulus plan. Of course, Congress recently passed their latest round of economic stimulus in regards to the COVID-19 crisis and economic crisis. It included something to the effect of $600 checks to most Americans, and most importantly for most Americans, expanded unemployment benefits. Democrats and Joe Biden in particular called that a down payment on further economic stimulus. I'm fully in support of more government stimulus. I think the more the government gets involved to help people out, the better in general. And so this, $1.9 trillion economic stimulus will include some $400 billion to combat COVID-19, such as by expanding testing and contact tracing and rebuilding the nation's public health infrastructure. It also potentially includes $1,400 direct payments to families and more generous unemployment benefits and a push to set the federal minimum wage at $15 an hour. Those all sound like good things to me. And lastly, we're going to talk about a story that might be less in the headlines this week, but this is a California grocery chain called Albertsons. They're going to, they've planned to lay off some of their workers and replace them with gig workers like from DoorDash so that these gig workers can deliver food for them. So instead of having sort of, long-term, full-time, or at least part-time employees with benefits, they're going to replace them with contract workers in California who don't have those benefits to make the deliveries for them. This is an effort to reduce labor costs and comes about as a result of California's Prop, was it 52?
22.
Prop 22, something we covered in 2019, I think it was now, Matt, where essentially California...
No, it was last year.
It was just last year, 2020?
It just passed. Yeah,
where California voters essentially sided with Silicon Valley and big tech companies to not count gig workers as employees and to instead count them as contract workers. This is something that big tech and Silicon Valley had lobbied hard for because it essentially makes their market and business plans work by essentially reducing labor costs. So we got three things to talk about. Plenty to get into on Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. Matt, why don't we go ahead and start with Trump's social media ban?
Okay.
There's multiple ways to phrase this. I think perhaps the best one is simply to go with the black or white question, and then of course we'll expand it out from there to reflect the fact that reality is often in shades of gray and not just two shades, black or white. To start with that though, Matt, do you think it was good or bad, right or wrong for, say, Twitter or Facebook to ban Donald Trump off of their platforms?
Well, I want to start by giving the easiest answer to this question, which is that, a lot of debate has been centered around whether or not Trump should have been banned because of reasons like, is this obviously Trump has a history of inciting violence, of being an apologist for hate groups and racist organizations, and that sort of thing is not something that we want to encourage in our society. at the same time, the sort of argument against banning him has been like, well, this could be an overreach of corporate power or a portend of what might be coming as corporations continue to grow and monopolize the internet and make it just less and less a place of free expression. And to all this, I'd say the simplest answer is that, worrying about Trump's tweets would never have been a problem if Trump had never been president to begin with. And the only reason why, in my opinion, Trump was even able to become president is because we have a political system that, you could argue whether or not it's designed to intentionally, but it is by design. It disenfranchises people on both a political and economic level. And so, if you're coming at it from like a Marxist standpoint, that's the same thing. But not everybody takes that viewpoint. But what I'm saying is, if we had a political system that actually encouraged people to vote and be involved and engaged in politics by having a political party, or more than one political party even, in the United States that actually served the people's interests, actually took care of them, actually made sure that everybody in this country had access to education, access to healthcare, not affordable healthcare, just access to healthcare, access to housing, to clothing, to food, to water, to the basic necessities of life, then I don't think that reactionary politics can take hold in a society like that. And you don't have Donald Trump becoming president in that version of history that we are not living in, unfortunately.
Matt, let me ask you again. Do you agree or disagree with Twitter or Facebook for banning Trump on their platforms? No, I'm just messing with you. Great. So good answer. You're highlighting a lot of the nuance to this. I guess, do you, for the record, do you want to commit to sort of a yes or no, good or bad? Or
yeah, I'm not gonna be like, I realize that I just sort of like punted, and I'm not going to be. I think. Well, I know I texted you when I first heard about it. That was like, I felt like I've graduated when when Twitter banned Trump permanently, because I was like, oh man, I was kind of sad about it. Not in the sense that obviously Donald Trump's a terrible person, and everything he stands for is just about everything he does is horrible, and like he's very unique in that way, and that there's almost nothing about him that is
redeeming.
Yeah, he's funny. He can be very funny.
Yeah, he's entertaining. That's his best thing. And, that's his career, is entertainment.
And so, like, from that standpoint, he's had some really funny tweets over the years, and I'm not on Twitter, and so it's no real loss for me. But I have gotten a good laugh out of some of his tweets over the years.
Yeah, and that's where politics has gone, right? He's entertaining, so good enough for me, right?
That's all that we have. We don't have can't do anything about it.
There's just that vehicle for entertainment is no longer in my life. I'm sad about that. Right? Yeah,
that's how I feel. That's all I'm gonna say.
But so cheeky and backing away from the black or white argument, talking to the more shades of gray and what you brought up earlier about how it's not just about right or wrong. It's like, wow, what a pickle that we're in to even have a sitting US president banned off of a mass media platform because of inflammatory, divisive rhetoric that incites violence. Like, what a sad situation, and so I'm sort of frustrated by the debate of like, Twitter, good or bad, when it's like, obviously the context matters much more of how we got here. And Matt, you're totally right that if we actually had a politics where people were incentivized to vote, where it was easier to vote, where they weren't lied to by politicians that have been essentially paid off or in cahoots with corporations, then we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. The way I look at it is that I think that Donald Trump has, on a societal definition, lost his privilege to wield the platform and microphone that he has, right? Because literally, in one sense, he's lost that privilege because he lost an election. He lost the election, which loses him officially that privilege to have that bully pulpit of the presidency. You know, the issue, though, is that Donald Trump, whether he actually believes this or not, says that he doesn't believe he lost the election. And clearly, many of Donald Trump's supporters are willing to resort to armed violence, if not just rhetoric, on platforms such as Twitter and Facebook, through the spread of mis or disinformation, to say that Donald Trump didn't lose the election, that he lost, which officially, societally, politically speaking, causes Donald Trump to lose his power, which I think he also should lose out of like a moral societal standing. So it was a complicated, wordy answer to say that I am more than happy for Donald Trump to lose his access to Twitter and Facebook. Not only because, voters have voted him out. Of course, it doesn't mean that every president who, loses an election doesn't get a Twitter. I'm not saying that, obviously. What I am trying to say is that the context matters, and that when you have a sitting president who, we can still find Trump's tweets online. They're recorded. I'm at plenty of websites. When you look through his tweets, the vast majority of his tweets are disinformation, lies, bullying, and therefore that's not okay. And you can argue in this society and under free speech that, well, it's free speech, man. The way that we as a society get to regulate speech is by having the righteous outweigh with facts and reason and morals the unrighteous. That doesn't work anymore, man.
That never worked. That's right. Never worked.
Yeah. We need gatekeepers in a society of 330 million people and in a planet of 7.5 billion people where the internet exists and we can all communicate with a click of a button anonymously, and such like that. We need gatekeepers. Do I want Jack Dorsey to be my gatekeeper? Do I want Twitter to be my gatekeeper? No. I would love it if rational human beings as an American citizens were my gatekeeper. But clearly we're not doing a good job at that when you have so many Trump supporters and people who voted for Trump. When you have, 10 sitting Republican senators and 139 sitting Republican House representative members who voted not to recognize the results of this free and fair U.S. election, effectively asserting authoritarian control and abolishing American democracy. That's effectively what it was. That was the real coup. And so when you have that happening in the U.S., I don't know who my gatekeeper is. If it got to be Jack Dorsey here, sure, but it's certainly a slippery slope, and I hope this isn't our long-term solution.
Yeah. Jack Dorsey's a pretty handsome guy, but I don't know that makes him qualified for being the sole divine being to decide what is and what isn't allowed in the public sphere. I do want to say, to your point of, Trump sort of losing his platform because he's no longer he lost an election and he won't be the president in a week's time. My only real exposure that I can think of to Donald Trump before he announced his bid for the president's office in 2015 was the scene in Home Alone 2 where Macaulay Culkin asked him where the hotel lobby is or whatever it was.
I was just gonna say that.
And maybe walking past his books in Barnes and Noble or something. But anybody who anybody who had come into contact with Trump before, probably if they were operating with more than a few brain cells, came to the conclusion that this guy probably shouldn't be president. And then his very own announcement speech of his campaign was absolutely disqualifying. And so, again, it's if we had responsible gatekeepers in this country who didn't incite violence, who didn't promote or encourage conspiracy theories that have no basis in actual facts, then we wouldn't even be talking about this. Trump probably wouldn't even be president again. But we not only do we have that, we have whole swaths of media and organizations devoted to that. And so, like, I'm not happy about Twitter banning Trump. I don't think that again, it doesn't feel, it's not like a fix. I am concerned that all this is happening as his like we banned Trump from Twitter 2 weeks before he's going out of office. Like,
Right.
great, you know, like all this is happening way past the fact of it really even having any real effect on anything. I mean,
Absolutely.
sure, Trump would have retained those followers after leaving office, but at the same time, he's still not going to have the platform that the presidency affords him. And so all of this is happening as his administration is going out, while also there's been a major, like, we talked about this weeks ago or months ago, a new antitrust lawsuit has been filed against Google, and people are starting to think that we might actually, like the federal government actually start to be ramping up with its antitrust laws and sort of enforcing them against monopolistic tech companies like Google and Twitter and Facebook and so on. And there is some concern. I know that some journalists and outlets like The Intercept have noted that this might be an attempt to curry favor with the incoming Biden administration and to get them to look more fondly upon them and their practices and not judge them so harshly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the horse is certainly out of the barn in regards to Trump and his followers. You know, a big reason why Trump probably won the election was his social media presence. Twitter is the perfect metaphorical platform for someone like Trump, because he doesn't have to be long-winded, which would then hopefully show you how little he knows substantively about policy and things. He can just like do the next memeiest thing or the next zinger, as Matt, you and I were talking about. He's quite entertaining. You know, I mean, he's really good at using Twitter to you know, have us understand the next mean thing or lie he wants to say about people. And so I don't know what right you as an individual have to use a platform to spread disinformation, lies, and bullying all over and over again. I don't know what right you have. You know, like, do you need to do that? No. Should you do that? No. And so I don't know if I want to protect your right to use this platform to spread disinformation, because certainly companies like, you know, Twitter has caused us as a society to have an epistemic crisis. And what I mean by that is we certainly have a hard time, for whatever reason, discerning truth from fiction. And truth is never as, you know, simple as with being a golden statue on a shining hill. Of course, it's always fraught with shades of gray, but we are certainly facing crises with that right now, and the social media companies are certainly culpable with that. And we've seen a slow change over the years of, you know, Twitter recently this year and Facebook tagging a lot of Trump tweets and other you know, other
Hey, when did they
posts.
start doing that? It was just last year, right?
Yeah, just last year, by saying, you know, this claim is subject
maybe
to
not fully factual.
right. Yeah, so
like,
it's just
Mars is going to be crashing into the Earth in a matter of 3 days.
right.
Reports have concluded that this might be false.
Totally, as already 80 million Americans have seen it, you know. So I think we'll end our discussion about Trump's social media ban there, Matt. I guess all I'd like to say is, you know, I'm happy he's off of those platforms. I don't think he deserves the reach and power and bully pulpit he has with them. Am I like happy about Twitter's decision? Am I happy that we have to do this? No, it's kind of like what, you know, like impeaching a president. It's a somber moment. It's sad. While I think Trump should be impeached, I'm sad it has to happen, because it proves how messed up of a place we're in, right? So I'm sad that a sitting U.S. president has to have his social media account removed like he's a child, you know. But if you behave like a mean child, then I you know, I'm sad that we're there. So
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing about it, which was you sent me Jack Dorsey's Twitter post about this.
yeah,
like
13
right before
thread tweet.
his little thread that he posted on Twitter, and in it he talked about how, like, you know, if somebody doesn't like our business model, then they can just go somewhere else and use a different media website. I'm like, oh yeah, which one of the three would you go to? It's just
Right.
like, it's the same thing that Google said about, you know, people use Google because they like our service, not because we don't have competitors. And it's like, your name is literally a verb for using a search engine.
Right.
How much more of a monopoly can you be?
Absolutely. lot more to talk about big tech, Matt. We'll pivot from here though, and just remind you that you're tuned in to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. We're talking about several events of the past week. We just chatted about Trump's ban on social media from Twitter, Facebook, and a few other platforms. Now we're going to pivot to President-elect Joe Biden's recently announced $1.9 trillion economic stimulus package. In fact, we're recording this Thursday night, and Joe Biden is actually talking about this in a live nationwide address right now as of the recording. So I'm sure when the show airs on Saturday, there'll be a few more fleshed out details. But let's talk about what we know as of right now. So President Biden and his team are proposing a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus package to combat COVID-19 and to hopefully revitalize the U.S. economy that has been so hurt by COVID-19, among other factors. Included in this package is $400 billion to directly combat the pandemic. That includes accelerating vaccine deployment and expanding contact tracing. It also includes, this is a big deal, for the first time in any federal stimulus so far for COVID-19, $350 billion for state and local governments. This is a huge deal because state and local governments, of course, have been hurt incredibly hard by the pandemic. There's been less tax revenue because, there's less people working, less people spending, and also for various reasons, let's say state governments have to balance their budgets, unlike the federal government, so they have to cut things back and they have to, lay off workers, and that further reduces the taxes that can be, made by the state or local government. So it's a cycle, and without federal relief that governors and local leaders have been calling for, they said that we're going to be in a really tough local public sector crunch for the years to come. We saw the Republicans try to block any efforts to have state or local government aid because I actually can't think of a rational reason why they'd want that to happen. They would probably cite something like budgets.
Say states versus those states. It's a figure it out.
It's a red bailout of blue states, even though that's factually incorrect, and that actually blue states tend to subsidize red states through federal government taxes. So New York, for instance, is subsidizing, let's say, Mitch McConnell's home state as a red state in the South. That's a common misconception that is always cited, that it's a bailout for blue states that have spent money improperly. No, it's not true. Money goes from blue states to red states, and so I just can't think of a rational reason why Republicans wouldn't want to have federal aid go to state and local governments, but I'm glad to see that's included in Biden's proposed economic stimulus. So among $400 billion going to combat COVID-19, among $350 billion in planned state and local government aid, there also includes more efforts to help most Americans. That includes a $1,400 direct payment. So we had $1,200 through the CARES Act. There was $600 through their most recent aid, and now there's $1,400 planned. There's also an expansion of unemployment benefits, federally mandated paid leave for workers, and subsidies for childcare costs. There's also a push to expand the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. Matt, that all sounds like good stuff to me. I'm a big fan of that, especially after just the first week in 2021, over 1 million Americans filed for new unemployment claims. So we know that the harmful effects of COVID-19 in our economy are ongoing. In December 2020 alone, the American economy lost 140,000 jobs. And the pandemic will still be raging for several more months, and economic shocks can take long times to sort of bleed out and can take a long time to be stitched together. It's not necessarily like a light switch. So the idea is that if you inject a large amount of money now and actually help people out, then we can have a quicker turnaround and less of a lengthy and harmful storm to weather together.
Yeah, I mean, this is all coming at, like, we're being hammered continuously with horrible news about COVID. Like the nation wanted to have at least 20 million people inoculated with the vaccine by the end of December. I think we only got up to like 7 million. So we're down. We're not hitting the rate of vaccination that we want to be, or even aiming to. In addition to that, our infection rate is higher than it's ever been. And this is all coming as news of a new strain of coronavirus is hitting England very hard. And it's already in the US and will probably be peaking. People are estimating sometime in March. And this new strain, while it doesn't seem to be any more deadlier than the strain that came before it, it does seem to be as much as twice as contagious. And the sort of danger in that, and actually is that, you know, even more dangerous than being more deadly. You know, if you have a very extremely deadly disease, it actually becomes more difficult for it to be passed on to other people because it kills its host relatively quickly. But if it's just more contagious, then obviously more and more people are going to be infected, and you could have even more people die because of that. So that's where we are. That's where we're headed.
And there'll be a bigger burden on the nation's hospitals and healthcare system, of course, if more people are sick. And that's the whole point of flattening the curve and trying to reduce the infection rate so that if people do get sick, they can be given adequate care. And if people aren't sick with COVID-19 but still need to go to the hospital for one of the million reasons one might need to, that they can get care too. So this is all good stuff. I love the idea of a large government stimulus. I can already hear the choir of Republicans saying that this is too much government spending and that Democrats are going to just ramp up the government deficit. Because how was Joe Biden, to my knowledge so far, again, he's speaking about this as we're recording this episode, how has Joe Biden planned to pay for this $1.9 trillion economic stimulus? It's entirely through more federal borrowing, I believe. So more borrowing. Guess what? The Trump administration borrowed a ton of money too. The federal deficit has soared under the Trump administration for all of his calls to reduce it, and for all of the Republicans' calls to so-called be budget hawks. I'm sorry, Matt?
They forgot about the deficit for a while there, but now they've remembered that they hate having it do to them. So.
Republicans have this really remarkable medical condition called cyclical amnesia, and that's where anytime that they're in power and in office, they forget about all the things they criticize Democrats about. It's really remarkable. It's a unique thing that just Republicans have. Yeah. Maybe if we expanded our healthcare system, we could learn more about that. But who knows? So I mean, one need only look at the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that Republicans were so willing to ingratiate themselves over, that is completely and utterly ballooning the nation's debt and completely and utterly hamstringing the government's effort or ability at all to fund itself through taxation. And so, whenever a Republican will complain about budget deficits, I'm just going to imagine a Muppet just talking over them, like Kermit the Frog or something, just like mah, 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 and that's all I'm going to picture, because I don't want to give it the slightest inkling of my attention.
I think you're thinking of the parents in Charlie Brown cartoons.
Oh, that works too. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great
Kermit's
one.
actually very eloquent.
I do like Kermit. Yeah, he's a nice guy. Nice Muppet.
He's a good fun.
Right, good frog.
So,
all for more government stimulus. Hold on there, Jason. What about the government debt? I certainly am not a fan of the idea of debt, because I've been cultured to believe that, balanced budgets and fiscal responsibility is good. We don't have a ton of time to get into this, but there's not a lot convincing me that that our federal government really needs to care about debt, because money, it doesn't actually exist, by the way. It's invented, and we all agree that it exists by just pretending that it does. So
this is where the origin of the phrase "money is time" comes from.
Right.
They're both invented. They don't actually exist.
Right. And so when I want to trade you this thing I made, I cut down a tree in my backyard, and then I drove some nails through it that someone else smelted down some metal to make. And then I like give you this wooden chair I made, and you give me a piece of paper, a green piece of paper back that has a 20 on it, $20. You know, we invent that relationship of exchange. That somehow this chair that I made through my actual labor is equal to this green piece of paper with a 20 on it. And but that's even too generous, because most money nowadays doesn't actually exist. Most money, the vast majority of money, is not even printed nowadays. The vast majority of money is just on a computer somewhere. That is a number on a spreadsheet. And so, you know,
Bitcoin.
Right. Well, not even Bitcoin, right? Yeah. I mean, it's totally like Bitcoin, but not even. So, you know, new money is being created and destroyed all the time because, you know, banks and spreadsheets just like add zeros to the end of things. And obviously it's more complicated than what I'm saying, but that's essentially what it is. You know, money is imagined. You know what's not imagined? People having like healthcare or roof over their head or whatever. So, you know, I'll do whatever we got to do to get people to meet their material needs. I'm all for that.
Yeah, you can tell yourself that like food is imagined and try to live like Ryan Gosling in Blade Runner, wherein his computer wife puts that holographic meatloaf over his grimy whatever he was eating. But
right.
One
last thing that I want to get to about this proposed Biden stimulus is that he's also calling for a public health jobs program to fund 100,000 people to do vital public health work and to rebuild America's public health infrastructure.
How much money?
I don't have a specific dollar amount to that, but he wants to do that. And we talked on the show last week about how the Democrats are going to have control of the presidency and the narrowest of majorities in Congress. And I was saying, you know, what would be great is if we took a bold, you know, fight to climate change by starting like a green energy jobs program and incentivizing job creation and transferring people from the fossil fuel industries into the green energy sector, which is very lucrative. You know, I'm all for government job training programs of this sort, because anything that can help people to get employed and to actually, you know, through their employment, do good things like make renewable energy or do contact tracing or you know, expand our public health is a good thing. And I think that's what the government is partly here to do. So I'm glad to hear something like that as well. Let's pivot now, though, to our last topic of discussion for Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXAR in Rochester. This is episode 127 of Evidence of Design. Matt, we have been on air for the entirety of the Trump presidency, I think. Like, we've never had an episode of Evidence of Design where Trump wasn't president. Next week,
March 2017.
Yeah. Next week, episode 128, we got to reinvent ourselves because all of our problems will be gone, I think. Right? Is that how that works? And we'll just...
We won't have a reason to be around anymore.
Right. We'll have
to return to the ocean.
We should crawl back from whence we came. We could talk about the sacred manifestations in our lives. You know, we could talk about religion like we started out with.
Well, I'd have to have sacred manifestations in my life. We're not going to talk about that.
You have a week to get in touch with something sacred, Matt. Make it happen.
I'm gonna lock myself in my room.
Already what we do.
Yeah, you know. You don't have to talk about that.
Well, hey, let's turn to our last subject on Evidence of Design here, 100.9 FM WXIR. In California, the most populous state in the nation is a grocery chain called Albertsons. I had never heard of anything but Wegmans, man. That's how much this corporate...
Well, I think they're not just in California either.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, they're a large multi-billion-dollar chain. They've announced that they're going to lay off some of their workers and replace them, their drivers, and replace them with gig workers.
Who are unionized.
Yeah, tell us about this, Matt. What's going on?
Well, essentially, so you're right where we talked back in 2019, we talked about how California, I can't remember the name of the law, but they had passed a law that would essentially make it impossible for companies like Uber and Lyft to continue to classify their drivers as gig workers or as contract workers. so what these companies will do oftentimes is that the only employees they have are the people who work on the software that makes their apps that drivers use in order to pick up people and patrons use in order to pay drivers and the company, and call the drivers. By classifying their drivers as contract workers, these companies like Uber, Lyft, and other companies that we associate with the gig economy, like DoorDash, they are able to get out of treating them with the same sort of rights afforded to employees. Like they don't have to give them paid time off or other benefits, health insurance, stuff like that. California passed a bill back in 2019, I believe, towards the end of the year, that basically said you can't do that anymore. This past election cycle, because of California's, I don't remember what this is called. Maybe you can help me, Jason. Their populace can actually vote on laws.
A referendum, or we have a similar thing, a ballot initiative, a ballot.
Yeah, something like that. There was a ballot. There was a chance to vote on a law called Proposition 22, and Proposition 22 was Uber's effort, and essentially to circumvent the law that California had passed last year, and to continue to classify its drivers as contract workers. And it passed. And part of the reason why it passed is because companies like Uber and Lyft contributed to an ad campaign worth over $200 million, while the opposition was only able to raise about $10 million. So, there's no reason why we need to worry about big business being involved in politics. And Citizens United is one of the greatest accomplishments of our civilization. And everybody can just go about their lives, not worry about this anymore.
We can both figure out how to fly to the moon and figure out how corporations can donate as much as they want. That's a significant achievement in human history.
I don't know why anybody's worried about this, really. Like, it's not a big deal. Yeah. And so Albertsons is like this grocery chain that Jason and I just found out about last week that was like, I bet we could hire all those contract workers that are already working for DoorDash and just pay them instead of our unionized drivers way less money.
Matt, you're being unfair here because this,
it's true.
This was covered in.
I'm taking way too joyful a tone for this. I'm being way too jovial about it.
This was covered in a few different outlets, the Washington Post among others. In the Washington Post, that they quote a statement from Albertsons, and they say, quote, this decision will allow us to compete in the growing home care delivery market more effectively. Since the COVID-19 outbreak, our e-commerce business has risen to new heights and has become more strategically important to Albertsons companies. So, Matt, I think what you're failing to see here is that this decision by Albertsons is something that is beneficial to them, and you're not acknowledging the fact that this is helpful to one side of the party. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, I just wonder, like, are there laid off unionized drivers? Are they going to still shop at Albertsons? Like, or is like was that like some misplaced loyalty on their part, or who's going to take care of them?
Oh, okay, I see. So while this decision by Albertsons to lay off some of their sort of unionized or full-time long-term employees and replace them with gig economy workers who don't get any benefits and tend to make a lower wage, while this decision would benefit Albertsons to allow them to, quote, it's strategically important, it might not be beneficial to the human beings who are doing the labor in the corporation to, make their ends meet and to have benefits like healthcare and whatnot. It doesn't.
I just, eventually, like, people aren't going to be able to afford food, and like, what then? What's going to be the strategy there? Right.
There was another there was another statement from, oh golly, I'm trying to find it here. Oh yeah, this is really great. So in the same Washington Post article that covers this, it just it's Googleable, but it's called Albertsons is laying off employees and replacing them with gig workers as app platforms rise. That's from the Washington Post, Eli Rosenberg, January 6th, 2021. There's a statement here in this article from DoorDash that says, okay, so DoorDash employees, they don't make money on the time that workers spend between deliveries. So, when workers are actually making deliveries itself, they're on the clock, but the time that they're spending between deliveries, so that could be just waiting to load up your next call, or driving from your one delivery back to the store or something, then they're probably they're not going to be on the clock for that, and they're not getting paid, even though normal employees would get paid for that time. DoorDash employees would not. So, okay, even though they're not getting paid for time between deliveries, the DoorDash spokesperson says that the workers make an average of $22 an hour when you don't count in that downtime that they don't get paid for. But the kicker is this, is that the DoorDash employee also says drivers are eligible for some health insurance subsidies through the Affordable Care Act when they work 15 hours or more a week. So the defense of DoorDash, when they're called out to say, these gig economy workers don't get health care when they're counted as contractors, and you're saving money by not giving them a right that in American society has been fought for, which is health care in exchange for labor, which I say is a really stupid bargain to begin with. Healthcare should be inherently a human right, not one you just get for labor through some labor, as we see now. The DoorDash spokesperson says, well, they can always go through the Affordable Care Act. Right, that thing that Republicans spent 10 years trying to so-called repeal and replace, and then they gave up on actually replacing it, and they just wanted to repeal it because they're a morally and intellectually bankrupt party who didn't have anything better to replace it with at all. And so this multi-billion-dollar company, DoorDash, says, well, we're going to pass the buck and turn it on to the government to fix this problem, and don't ask about us.
No, yeah, it makes sense. Not paying people while they're not technically working, that's efficiency, Jason.
Right. And also, it's not up to us to give healthcare. Have them go through this thing. Think
about how much money that they're saving for themselves that they're not being taxed for or putting back into the system in any way to benefit society.
Right.
I mean, they're going to be fine.
It's really quite remarkable. I mean, so, here's the thing. I talk to people about this all the time. It's easy to be flip about this. I truly believe that there is a way for human beings to still be, for humans to be incentivized to work. So number one, I believe that there's a way for humans to be incentivized to work. Number two, I believe there is a way for companies to still be profitable. Number three, I still believe there is a way for individuals to not go bankrupt out of, number four, the government having strong social safety net systems that are funded through, public finance, like taxation. I fully believe that we can have higher taxes and stronger government funded, social safety net systems through higher government spending, while at the same time, individuals are still incentivized and proud of and motivated to work, that companies are still able to be profitable, and three, that individuals will not go bankrupt from this taxation that the government might have to do to fund social safety net systems. I fundamentally believe in all of those things I just said. And I think the problem when you talk to a lot of people about this stuff is that they simply see that, like, a company like DoorDash or a company like Albertsons is simply doing what they're trying to do because they have a right to do it as a company, which is simply be as profitable as possible. And they worked hard to be profitable, and they worked hard to build the infrastructure and the service platforms and systems that they have. And therefore they own a right to the money that they make. I don't believe in that. I think that human beings have a right to things like healthcare, universal basic income in a capitalist society, and housing, more so than companies have a right to be profitable. And I think that is where, like, the major disagreement can be distilled down to, and perhaps modern politics in many ways. It's just like, do you think humans are worth more than companies? You know, who inherently deserves more protections?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that we need to even try to take the moral high ground anymore, because we've always had that. And just the only thing that I can say is that, you know, you will be left behind. You're not these people. You're, if you're listening to this, if you're making this like we are the people who drive the cars. We're the people who work in schools. We're the people who work in libraries. You know, we're the people who get left behind when companies figure out a way to make us unnecessary. And the whole talking point that, you know, if you give people a universal basic income, if you give them free healthcare, if you give them access to the basic needs to live, no matter what their no matter what their employment situation is, then they just won't work anymore, is total bollocks. Because people need purpose and meaning in their lives in order to be happy. And so if you give them the ability to survive and not have to worry about losing things like a home or the ability to feed themselves, I think you'll find that most of them will still want to work. They'll just find something that is worth their time, that they enjoy, and can contribute to a happier, healthier society.
Absolutely, Matt. You know, people are doctors because they choose to do that and they find value in it. You know, people are teachers because they choose to do that and they find value in it. People do things because they want to do it and be stretched. You know, everyone thinks that, oh man, if I just didn't have to go to work, I would just like sit home and watch Netflix. I mean, most people have been doing that for a year. How is that going?
Sucks.
It sucks, right? Like, no one wants to do that. You know, it's like a kid who wants to stay home from school one day so you can just play Xbox. You do it for 5 hours, like, this is great, and then you're like, man, this is awful. You know, it's like you feel like a slug because the human brain and society isn't engineered to just like sit on a couch, stare at a screen, and eat potato chips. We want to connect with other people. We want to push ourselves to make our societies better. And so labor is inherently enjoyable for human beings, right? As long as we're given the capacity to be creative and expressive and have it done in a way that is not exploitative for us, and that we're being forced to labor to make ends meet and being forced to labor in dead-end jobs. You know, it's not just that we want jobs. It's that we want to have productive, meaningful labor while also being able to make our ends meet. And there's a way for us to do that as a society. Hey, folks, we got to call it here, though. You can always find our past episodes on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. We're called Evidence of Design. You'll find us on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts at that name. You can also communicate with us via email at radioeod@gmail.com. That stands for Radio Evidence of Design. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter as well at Radio EOD. Communicate with us throughout the week. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know if you have a subject for an upcoming show that covers what we cover: critiquing income and wealth inequality, supporting democratic values, and social justice. Something I should point out is that our normal other co-host, Mary Lawrence, has been doing some work around media literacy. She's done a lot of work in that field, and she actually just hosted a media literacy workshop in collaboration with Reclaim the Narrative, WXIR's grassroots news show, and that's posted on our YouTube channel and also WXIR's platforms as well. So you can find that out, learn more about media literacy and how you cannot fall prey to the vast amounts of disinformation and misinformation that are out there. Speaking of which, if you don't know the difference between disinformation and misinformation, might be a good workshop to check out as well. What else? Up next is the Esquire Hour. They always put on great shows, and we'll be back next Saturday, 100.9 FM, WXIR. Until then, I was your host, Jason Taylor, joined by my good friend and co-host, Matt Treadwell.
Loktar Ogar.
Matt, who's the music intro and outro provided by?
Me.
Good stuff. Strugi, until next time, be well, be safe, take care, and bye-bye.